Hi all, I'm going to share my presentation here. So my name is Jared Olson. I'm from formerly NASA, and now I'm working with the Space Force, Space Security and Defense Program. And so I'm a contractor support. So I also work with my colleague Sam Sugathapala, he's tied in, and Andrew Foster. And Nathaniel Lee is our government point of contact, Captain Lee. And so today I'll be going through an overview of basically our status on the development of a Space Force Tactical Doctrine Wiki, and giving you guys some background in our development, where we're coming from. And then I'll talk about some of our expected extensions that we're going to be using, and ways that, you know, all of us can learn things from each other to solve some of our challenges. So tactical doctrine as a broad topic, the way to understand it is just, how to understand what to do, what the warfighter should do in certain situations for certain conditions. So we have Captain Lee who's joined. So Nate, you want to give a broad overview of just what tactical doctrine means? I'll go to the next slide here and we can describe some of the background.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so really the impetus behind this is that, right, the Space Force is a new service, and it's, while we've been doing things in the space domain for a long time, we're really starting to think of space not only as a supporting domain, but also a domain that conflict might extend into. So as we rapidly field new systems and come up with new tactics, right, the Space Force is really rapidly building its tactical knowledge of, exactly what it means to operate these spacecraft and their supporting nodes in contested, degraded, operationally limited environments. And so we really felt that the legacy Air Force process of building up tactical doctrine, with the understanding of the domain as a warfighting domain, was just not agile enough. So that's what led us to the wiki. And Jared and the team they're really the SMEs who've been able to do a lot of the nuts and bolts of actually standing up the wiki. But we definitely think that, especially as the Space Force tries to lean into being a digital and agile service, that the wiki is absolutely the mechanism that we need to both enable collaboration, publish new information, and disseminate it out to the force quickly. And with that, I'll stand by for any questions, but otherwise, Jared, back over to you. Thanks.
Right. The tactical doctrine is vital to everything, and it's spread across all these different places, right? So we really realized that we needed to bring it together into a centralized place. And one of the challenges is, if you don't do that, then you get duplication of effort, you get mismatches and confusion between different groups. So we're preaching to the choir here, but we're showing some of our challenges and how we're going to approach them. So the wiki format, since we're focusing on these tactics, techniques, and procedures, you'll see that acronym. That's basically how you approach the tactical doctrine, how you do what you need to do for the warfighter. And we also wanted for the wiki to be able to allow hypotheses, allow new ideas, a place for those to grow and people to collaborate to build something kind of from scratch, things that might be an option. And if you have this more rigid, formalized publication process, then that really stifles some of the things that people might put out there just as an idea. If we can make a one-stop shop with all of our academics, all of our analysis in one place, that makes it a lot more usable for the warfighter. And we're working on another set of tools called Tactical Decision Aids, which is basically a place where you can do a quick calculation or a visualization of something that you would use to help develop a tactic. And we're going to include these in the wiki. It's a separate subsystem that I'll talk about briefly. So it's separate from the wiki software, but it's hosted on the wiki pages itself, and that way we can tie those into the tactics pages and be able to query things and organize things in a smart way. So I have a list here of some of the contents that we are building up on our wiki, and a lot of these are pretty standard, but the ones to focus on are the lessons learned section. We're really going to leverage that as a easy form that people can go in and quickly make a lessons learned after a mission or after a simulation. I mentioned the tactical decision aids, a community calendar that everybody can have a centralized place for big events that the whole community needs to be aware of. And then a large user guide section that guides people through so we can help push that culture from the bottom up and onboard new users easily. Initially, we're focused on the orbital warfare aspects of it and broadening that as much as we can into broader tactical doctrine for the space combat groups. So we are focusing on building up our own server. So initially we were looking at some of the other servers that are out there, including some of the other government servers like Intellipedia. And we are pushing for our own server, and this is some of the things that we can leverage with an in-house wiki server. I wanted to specifically highlight some of the potential for machine-to-machine integration. If we're able to connect to some of the other databases, then we can push and pull that information into the wiki and format it in a way that people can use it. We're leveraging the pending reviews extension for collaborative reviews for edit cross-checking. And so basically, when somebody makes an edit, you'll be able to see this mark reviewed button and a quick diff of that edit. And so we can get the cross checks going across the wiki. And that way we have a better idea that the information is going to be accurate, is going to be up to date. Building out forms with page forms. I was excited to see that W as page forms. That might be something we can leverage for HTML5, as well as semantic MediaWiki and semantic drill down for some smart queries. So on the next page, I have a list of the extensions that we're looking to use. Many of these were ones that we had used at the for the ISS Wiki with NASA, and pulling in some other ones that we saw will be really useful, like the community calendar we imported from Intellipedia. And also leveraging some forms and extensions from MilWiki, which is a wiki that started with the Army and eventually grew to be DoD-wide, really focusing on, like I said, the watch analytics and pending reviews to spur that cross-checking culture. And we are discussing approved revisions that came up earlier today, and that was something that came up in some of the presentations and briefings we've given, is that, hey, there may be times where there is this information on a certain type of page that is really operationally important and needs to be accurate before it's used. And so this might be the way to solve that problem. We put approved revs in place for those specific types of pages, and then we go through that kind of draft and then approval process before that's actually acted on. We discussed some of the comment streams, and I think discussion tools was the new one. So looking at the best ways to leverage that talk page or comment style. And then extension thanks has been really useful to, just give that quick thumbs up to a user if they help contribute in some way. You can reinforce that good behavior. So just a brief overview of the OW Wiki system, and after I talk through all these, I'll zoom into these images so we can look at them in more detail. But it's split up into the Wiki system, which is named Minerva, and that's a standard Apache, MySQL, and MediaWiki software. Next to that is that TDA subsystem that I mentioned, and that's a standalone section that could be on this server or it could be on a separate server, and it's tied in so that it goes through this ActiveMQ and TDAC2 mediator to back and forth to the client from the server, so that you can do calculations on the server side and then serve the results to the user. And like I said, we plan to tie this in as much as possible with the wiki pages to both describe how to use the TDAs and then organize them and link them in a good way. So let me zoom in, see if you guys can see this. So the first one is pretty simple. It's just the overview of Minerva on one side and TDA on the other side with the clients connecting to that. And then on the Minerva subsystem. We have the MediaWiki extensions connected to MySQL. And so I'll highlight the TDA subsystem a little bit more. You can see the mediator here is going through ActiveMQ. The TDA UI is what shows up to the user and serves just like the HTTP, just like MediaWiki does. So that's a broad overview of the whole system, and we're tying it all together in a way that makes it pretty much transparent to the user, right? So they can just navigate through MediaWiki, do a search, and that'll point them to the TDAs that they need to use. So this is the last slide talking about some of our challenges, the things we might be looking to collaborate with people on. A big one, like we talked a little bit, was guiding the wiki culture shift, figuring out ways to onboard people in such a way that they're excited about using the wiki and they use it in their day-to-day job, spread by word of mouth. Building your data credibility via those edit cross-checks, finding the best way to set up forms and format our SMW data structure. So I have been working with Lex a little bit, looking at his core ontology, figuring out the best ways to make that base layer of semantic MediaWiki templates and properties. I mentioned we're importing the community calendar. We're also looking at importing portal code and potentially gamification type things. So edits, as users they get enough edits, they'll get a certain badge. All these tricky things like authentication protocol, server management, and then this data classification one is a big one because there's things at multiple sensitivity levels. So we expect to have different installations that we're going to have to deal with based on the sensitivity level of the data. And since everything within that certain level will be open to that level, we want that to be as open as possible to the extent that we're allowed. So overall, those are the challenges, and I'm excited about some of the things I've heard so far today. And feel free to ping me on Element. I'll paste my username in the chat, and looking forward to talking with people. So with that, we're ready with questions.
Yeah, Jared, there's a few. If you go to the backstage chat there.
Okay. So let's see, what is your user participation rate for wiki content reviews? So if we have 100 users, how many of them are performing reviews? So we're at the point I wanted to talk a little bit about exactly where we are in the development. So we have a prototype wiki that we have some pages built out on, and then we also have some pages built out on Encyclopedia that we've already been using for the users. But later this summer is when we're going to actually go to a full production server and hope to start onboarding more people. So Captain Lee, how far are we on users actually contributing to the pages on Encyclopedia?
Yeah, so for the first part of that question, we're bringing in users kind of by invite right now to help build the content, because we don't want to release it to the community until there's kind of already a baseline that makes the site functional. So right now, all of our users are participating, but only because they're specifically people that we've invited. So I don't have a good estimate of how participatory it'll be. We want to make it as much as possible. So certainly, Jared will be the focal point for any kind of best practices or lessons learned in terms of how to generate participation. And then for the second question about performing reviews, the intent is really to have the smallest amount of content require review. We want the vast majority of it to be traditional wiki style, where you can edit things, right? And the edit shows up in real time to all of the other users. There's really only kind of a small subsection of the content that is more higher level doctrine that we don't expect to change very often, that might require review. But otherwise, we really want to be able to leverage that it's a wiki, not just in name because that's a buzzword and we're trying to say we're being digital and using a wiki, but actually use it like a wiki for the purpose of having collaboration from across the entire community.
the goal as far as once we're going, once, the server is running and people are using it, if we had 100 users, I would expect several dozen of them would be pretty actively checking their reviews. And we're going to make, they're going to be small reviews, so we don't expect it to be a big time sink to do these quick checks. And then you hit, yep, I've reviewed that. And then probably maybe 10 out of the 100 is doing a lot of contribution, a lot of editing, and then we have a few admins. So it's going to be something that we develop over time. How did the idea for wikis and MediaWiki specifically get started there? So this was coming out of a few conferences that we'd had early last year, right, Captain Lee?
Yeah, it was just over a year ago that, as the Space Force approached, hey, how are we going to do Doctrine broadly? And we broke it up into strategic, operational, and tactical. Those are kind of the three levels of military doctrine. The other two are being addressed by other organizations, and they don't change as frequently as tactical doctrine, so they're published under more traditional formats. But tactical doctrine, yeah, from pretty early on, some people were interested in the concept of a wiki as being a collaboration platform that could be used across the force.
Let's see next. How can you talk about or show how we deal with lessons learned and some example use cases? So we're going to build out a database and form for that, like I mentioned. So specifically for both like a real-time operation mission, the debrief after that will be recorded, lesson learned, and then also for training exercises, different use cases. How do pending reviews tie in with approved revs? So that's a good question. So they are distinct. Pending reviews will be something that we use all the time for all pages, and something that will be enabled for every user. So up at the top right, you have a link to your pending reviews, and the way it works is every page that you're watching, edit will show up on that list all in one place. And it will show you a quick diff. If it's a few lines, it'll just show up at the top of the page, and have that approve button next to it. And if it's a easy thing to view it with that one line diff, then you just click, yep, I agree with that, and mark it as reviewed, and it'll disappear from your list. If it's a bigger thing, it'll show it in a bigger block, and then you can actually go to the page, you can view the history, you can view the full diff if you want to. That's distinct from approved revs in the sense that approved rev is for specific pages that you want to more lock down, in the sense that if it's applied to a certain page, a user makes an edit, it will show that an edit had been made and that the current version of the page that everyone will see is not actually the most up-to-date version, right? So it'll show that there's a pending review or approved rev pending, and then a SME will have to go into that page, an expert in that subject, and they'll have to say, okay, yes, I agree with this mod, and set that newest edit as the approved revision. They click a button at the top, and then that's the page that's served to every user. So it's a way to add that extra step of verification in the process. We want to stay on the pending review side as much as possible so that we have that kind of agile, quick review process, and we have the cross checks ongoing throughout all the different pages. That's really part of building out the wiki culture so that people feel involved and feel like they're able to do those reviews. Sam, do you have anything else to add about any of those questions that we were talking?
No, I think you covered all of the details of MediaWiki. I'm happy to answer any technical questions in terms of the back end and any other details, but I think you've got all the MediaWikis in the bag.
Perhaps, Sam, you could talk a little bit about the hosting solution in Kubernetes and how we're looking to start developing that, since we were talking about it earlier today.
Yeah, so the current implementation of the system essentially is running on CentOS 7. and it's essentially a headless system, primarily using mostly COTS software, as Jared alluded to in a few slides ago. What we are looking to do is transition our COTS into containerized solutions, essentially using Kubernetes to act as the engine to power those containers. We found, or at least I found, the presentation this morning on putting MediaWiki into a Kubernetes container quite enlightening. I wasn't sure how I would do that, but that's a problem now that has a solution that I can now just walk the dog down the path, so to speak. I don't think I would want to go into any more detail without boring the audience, but I'm happy to take additional specific questions as they come up. Over.
And it looks like we got another question here that I think I'd be well placed to answer. So the question is, you emphasize the importance of a robust user guide, specific challenges or successes you can talk about in that regard. So I am the case study for that because I had zero wiki experience when we started this project, other than just being a traditional Wikipedia user in terms of just viewing content. So yeah, I have been our test dummy for a variety of different tutorials and how-to guides and things. And with no technical background, we figure if I can learn it, then your average Guardian can learn it. So yeah, it absolutely is essential, but we found that, yeah, right, that MediaWiki is pretty intuitive, right? It's much lighter than traditional coding in any of your go-to programming languages. So yeah, we've basically just been doing a lot of testing and iterating. So you know, we develop something, I test it, I give feedback, we roll it out, we pick a few other users to test it, and just keep iterating on it that way. And again, you know, as I'm kind of pitching this to higher ups and stuff, you know, one of the great benefits of using MediaWiki is there's never a time where you're locked in. You can always add more things if you learn them. So certainly we still, you know, continue to get feedback from the community on our different user guides and tutorial products, and we review those and roll them in pretty quickly. So it's been very successful so far.
Leverage a lot of what's already out there from Intellipedia and MilWiki. So they had some good tutorials. MilWiki had a portal that has multiple different sections that kind of walks you through from very basic all the way up to advanced template editing. And so that's a really good way to guide the user. And then they have along the top the tabs of all the different sections that you can easily navigate to so you can find what you're looking for. So Brian, I think that's all the questions that I can see. Did we get them all?
I think so. Yeah. Let me check. Yep. Yep. That's it.
Excellent. Thanks everybody for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Nathaniel Lee, Jared, and Sam. Great insight. It's nice to see that there's some agility going on with selection of software and technique. And thanks to all the presenters and panelists and moderators as well. We'll be starting up tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time. That's 1 p.m. UTC. So hope to see everybody there. And thanks again.
Thank you.